and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I'm Helen and today I'm going to be sharing with you my October wrap-up. The first book I read in October was Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Vanity Fair follows a young girl a girl who's young at the beginning of the book called Becky Sharp, who is from a lower class family and determined to make her way in the world. She does this via, she essentially sleeps her way to the top, I think is one way to put it. She uses all her wits and cunning and wiles to make her way to the top of the social ladder, crisscrossing at times with Amelia Sedley, her friend, or her one-time friend, who is incredibly good-natured and naive. This book is really interesting because it is set around the Battle of Waterloo, parts of it, and it discusses the sort of living situations at the time for the rich, and it looks a lot at the prejudices that the upper class had against those who they did not believe belonged in the upper classes. It also has a really interesting protagonist in Becky Sharp. She is not a heroine by any stretch of the imagination, however she is incredibly interesting to read about, and while you may not like her at times, you cannot deny that she is definitely a fascinating person. So yeah, I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was a really good book to start the month off with, and it was a fairly big one as well. I read 2 massive Victorian books this month and I'm really happy I did. The next book I read was Entanglement, The Secret Lives of Hair by Emma Tarlow. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was my only 5-star read of the month and I really recommend this. This book essentially follows the anthropology of hair. It, as it says on the back, see the world in a strand of hair. It looks at how hair travels, and especially at the manufacturing of wigs and where the hair that gets made into wigs comes from, and the sort of conditions of the factories where it comes from, if that makes sense. It is really interesting and I learned so much from this. It looks at the importance of hair in different religions such as Judaism and Hinduism, and it also looks at the importance of hair in different general cultures. So for example, the importance of hair to those of African descent and the importance of hair in Asian cultures, especially. I think it predominantly focuses on Chinese hair, though there is quite a lot about Indian hair in here as well. It is amazing. It made me completely rethink the way that I look at hair. The next book I read on Kindle, and it was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. The Hating Game follows Lucy Hutton and Joshua Templeman, who are both both personal assistants to the 2 CEOs of their business, which recently went through a merger. They absolutely hate each other, and of course this is your typical hate to love romance. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which I know seems like a low rating, but yeah, I still really enjoyed it. I found the characters really witty and engaging and just thought they were great, and I cannot wait to see more from Sally Thorne. I'm definitely going to read her next book. I feel like I might need to up it to 4 stars, especially as I started another hate to love romance this month, Love to Hate You by Anna Promoli, and based on the way that one is going, I think it's going to be about 2 stars. So yes, I really enjoyed Love to Hate You. It was exactly what I needed after 2 incredibly heavy books, and I'm very glad I read it. The next book I read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is Leigh Bardugo's debut adult novel, and it follows Galaxy Stern, or Alex Stern, who has been accepted into Yale on account of the fact that she can see ghosts. She then has to deal with the intense academic pressure, along with the pressure to help this secret society that she's been inducted into. I gave this 4.25 out of 5 stars, which I was kind of expecting it to be a 5-star read, and it was not in places. I did not feel the urge to pick this up at times. However, I adored the setting of Yale. I read part of this when I went to an open day for a university that I think I love and that I really hope I get into. And the university and Yale seemed really similar in my head, and I think that just sort of made me love this book. I also really enjoyed this book because I really liked the mysteries, especially the mystery about Darlington. My reading journal just fell onto the floor. Especially the mystery about Darlington, who is Alex's mentor. However, he disappears. And the last line of this book made me so hyped for the next book. I cannot wait for Leigh Bardugo to write it. It's a bit like the final line of King of Scars, made me so excited for book 2. She's really good at ending on a cliffhanger. There is one particular bit of this book that I loved. There was a quote when it was quite early on, and she's walking back across campus to get to sleep after doing one of these rituals, and she talks about how she always feels like she's running out of time and how she never has time to do anything because she has all these commitments. And that really struck a chord with me, and I just love the quotes like that, and I love it when you can really relate to a book. So this was 4.25 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was The Deathless Girls by Kieran Millwood Hargreave. I give this 3.75 out of 5 stars. I know my rating system is a little bit specific, but oh well. This story follows 2 sisters whose names are Kizzy and Lily. Kizzy and Lily, and they are both sort of cast into darkness when their home is destroyed and they are dragged off to be slaves to the boyar. Sorry, I keep coughing. I didn't feel that connected to the characters for the first 100 or so pages, which, given that I think this is only 300 pages long, it was a bit of a problem. I would have liked to have felt connected to them all the way through. However, by the end, I really liked the characters. There were quite a few minor supporting characters who I kind of did not care about, which made the last few lines of this book not as impactful as they should have been. And but I really enjoyed most of it. And I absolutely loved the sort of vampire trope in here. This is essentially a prequel to Dracula. It's all about the brides of Dracula, which I loved, because if you don't, which you probably don't know this, but I absolutely love Dracula and I love the whole vampire trope. So yes, I really enjoyed that part of this. But yeah, and I just felt the action scene at the end was a bit short. This is why I didn't give it 4 or 5 stars. The next book I read was Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell. This follows Simon and Baz and Penny and Agatha after the final events of Carry On. I give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was not as good as I was hoping. I will read the final book, but I was quite disappointed in this one. I felt like, it used a trope I absolutely hate. I love the enemies to lovers trope. I hate with a burning passion the miscommunication trope, and that was the main part of this book. So didn't like that very much. Also, I felt like quite a few of the characters had very sudden switches in their behaviour. For example, Simon, who's this guy, Simon at the beginning of this book is incredibly depressed, and I would have liked it if Rainbow Rowell had continued to explore the depression and continued to discuss, gone into it in a bit more depth. And I felt it sort of, he was depressed one minute and then the next he was absolutely fine. And while there were hints towards it throughout the rest of the book, I just wish it had been more discussed and in greater depth. I did, however, like where Baz's character is going. And also, the other thing that I didn't like about this book is I felt like there were certain characters who were introduced who didn't really have a purpose within the plot line. So, for example, there's a character introduced called Shepherd, and I felt like his only purpose was a big plot twist at the end, and I didn't really care about that plot twist. and I didn't really care about Shepherd, and I certainly did not like the romance that I think Rainbow Rowell is going to press upon it in the next book. So yes, I was conflicted about this. I was really looking forward to it. A bit like Ninth House, I was kind of expecting this would be a 5 out of 5 stars, and it was definitely not that. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5 stars for this one. Oh, I should say, however, I absolutely loved with this book the descriptions of America, and they made me so excited to visit America, which I'm probably not going to do for a while, but still, we're now up to the final 2 books I read. The next one is In a Glass Darkly by Joseph Sheridan LaFanu. I gave this 4.4 out of 5 stars. This is a collection of short stories. Each one is sort of a case file from this man called Dr. Hessidelius. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Where's the prologue? Here we go. Dr. Hesilius. They're various case files from Dr. Hesilius's notes, and each of them deals with a different supernatural happening. So for example, Green Tea, the first one, has the ghost of a monkey with glowing red eyes. The final one, Carmilla, deals with the vampire. I enjoyed the final one, Carmilla, very, very much. The final one, Carmilla, is very interesting as well because it portrays a lesbian relationship and not in an entirely negative light. So that was really interesting to read. My favourite out of this set, let me check the name, was Mr. Justice Harbottle. However, I also liked The Ruminly Dragon Volant and Carmilla, which those were the final 3 stories. I think I read the first 2, Green Tea and The Familiar, a bit too fast, especially The Familiar. I can't even remember what happens in that story. But if you're looking for some really short, mildly creepy stories, these are great. They are fairly short. I mean, the entire book's about 200 pages long. Most of the stories are 30 pages. One is 100 pages, but that is definitely the odd one out. So I enjoyed this very much. Yes. Sorry, that was such a bad way to end it. Yeah, it was really enjoyable. It was a fun, fast read. Each story was interesting and a different view into the supernatural. The final book that I read in October was the other massive Victorian novel I was talking about, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This was written by a woman whose name I will very quickly check. This was written by a woman whose name was Mary Ann Evans, and it is long. It's really long. I gave this 4.25 out of 5 stars. However, this is not a good book to read if you're looking to get into the Victorian genre. It is incredibly heavy in places, and yeah, there are so many characters who come in for a chapter and then just completely disappear. And I mean, I did not really get any of the first 400 pages, and I'm really going to need to reread this in the future. So, Middlemarch essentially follows a village called Middlemarch around a big election. There is a lot of talk about politics and reform in this, and the main character, there's 2 main characters. The main characters are Dorothea and Dr. Lydgate. Dorothea is very idealistic, and she marries someone called Mr. Cowsborn, who it very quickly turns out is nowhere near as brilliant as the man she thought him to be. Dr. Lydgate, on the other hand, marries a woman who he thinks is beautiful and brilliant, and who all of Middlemarch thinks is beautiful and brilliant, kind and charming and submissive. There is a lot of talk about women being submissive in this book, which I did not like. I understand that it was written at a certain time and I need to accept that, but yes, there is a lot of talk about that. Anyway, so Dr. Lydgate marries this woman, and it turns out that she is incredibly shallow, a spendthrift, and all she cares about is her reputation, which was very interesting reading so soon after Vanity Fair, because in Vanity Fair, Becky is the hero. In this, Rosamund is not a heroine or even really one of the main characters. So, follows their lives and the sort of almost the reforms that Dorothea is trying to put in place, coupled with the reforms certain members of the village are trying to put in place. It's quite a complex story, and there are a lot of chapters which are very short. There's another main character who I didn't realise was a main character until the epilogue. There is a character called Fred Vincy who really wants to marry a woman called Mary Garth. However, Mary Garth's parents want her to marry Mr. Fairbrother, who is a curate. I'm remembering more of this than I thought I would. There is a fair amount of mystery and intrigue in this book around some of these characters' pasts as they have hidden them. And yeah, by the end it was an enjoyable read, and I really liked Mary Ann Evans' style of writing. I really enjoyed reading that. However, it was very heavy and there were quite a few points where I was tempted to put this down. If you are going to read this, I would recommend reading it in fairly short chunks, at least the first while, because it can get very heavy if you read it for a long time. So yes, that is all I've got to say about Middlemarch. It was a good book though, and I am glad I read it. It was another Victorian classic that I had not read yet. Here are 7 of the 8 books I read in October. While it's not as many as some other months, I am still quite happy with my reading progress this month. I read 2 massive books, one fairly heavy book, Entanglement, and so many of these books utterly surprised me. Entanglement in particular, I was not expecting to love that anywhere near as much as I did, and I ended up absolutely adoring it. And The Hating Game, again, really reintroduced me to the romance genre, and I can't wait to read more of it. Yes, while some books disappointed me, I'm still very happy with what I read. So, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, my handle is @CatsandTeaBooks, on Instagram @ReadingWithCatsandTea, and please, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe. Tell me if you have read any of these books or if you plan on reading any of these books. If you have read them, what was your thoughts? If you haven't read them, do they intrigue you? Would you like to read them? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.